Into session. It's good to see you all here this morning. We're live and in person for a change, all except for Phil, and he's still in person, so that'll work out great. Before we get started, I'd like to read a note that Lana received in the office. This is to Lana, Nicole, Shannon, and Steve. I wanted to say thank you for adding value during the COVID-19 pandemic. You modeled safety for everyone and got to work supporting the community with loans to help them, the local businesses, continue. I also appreciated the information you gathered for reopening of Finney County and the guides that have been very useful. Many organizations stopped, but you found a way to add so much even during this time. I also love that you got Tom on Zoom. Who would have figured? Troy under the mayor. With that, we will call our meeting into order. First item on the agenda would be the consent agenda. You all received those electronically. The agenda, the minutes, the financials. I would like to make one amendment to the minutes of the last meeting, and that's on the first page where we took roll and got Larry Geyer listed as absent. Larry Geyer was present. Either that or somebody else made two motions and seconds on him later on in the meeting. So I think Larry might have called in just a touch after we started, so we didn't get him down, but if you would change that. Are there any other additions or corrections to the minutes or questions on any of the financial information or any of that?
I move we accept the consent agenda as amended.
A second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. We've got a chance for public comment.
Just glad to be here. Good to see your faces.
That's part of it. We're glad to have you here. We hope that you enjoyed the last 3 virtual board meetings that we had, so it's kind of nice to be back live and have everybody all in the same place. So Sheila, it's good to have you with us this morning. If you'd like to speak, we'll sure give you the floor. Good, everything downtown vision going well?
It is. Obviously, the businesses struggled, going through this, but we encouraged website development, which a lot of them did, and that will help them moving forward.
Good, good. Well, I think gave someone a little time to look at the way they do business and maybe give some consideration to that. So, okay. Being no public comments, we'll move on. Lana, would you like to start with yours?
Yeah, and I would like to start with a huge thank you to Nicole for all of her work to keep us compliant with Open Meetings Act throughout this pandemic. That was one of the things that Derek Schmidt was really clear about at the start of this was all public organizations, all organizations that receive any public funds are still absolutely required to adhere to the Open Meetings Act. That wasn't necessarily easy, but Nicole put a lot of time and energy into making sure that we were not only public, available on Facebook. All of our meetings have been recorded just like they would be ordinarily. We didn't skip a beat, and that is huge. I have heard of a lot of organizations that weren't compliant throughout the pandemic, and I have little doubt that the Attorney General will be getting complaints and will probably be following up with those. So again, huge thank you to Nicole. Considering we don't have an IT department, it was really impressive that she was able to put that together, and so we owe her a huge thank you.
Yeah,
Well
and
done.
yeah, Bob,
That's fine.
and I would just like to add to that, I think real kudos go to our entire staff for everything that you guys did through all of this, working from home and the additional time that you spent in the office when the doors were locked and lights were out and everything else, but you did an amazing job. You did really well with everything, so, okay.
We certainly learned that we can do our jobs anywhere we are. So we can probably not worry about vacations anymore because they'll all be working vacations from now on, right? Just kidding. Okay. Yeah, real quick, I'm going to have a revolt on my hands. All right. It is very nice to see you all in person this morning, so thank you for being here. Project 620, this is a new project. I met with them for the first time yesterday. It is a manufacturing and sort of manufacturing and logistics project. I think it will move pretty rapidly. They've already located a site and some staffing and so forth, so I think that one will move pretty rapidly.
Rapidly is 3 to 5 years. Yeah.
They anticipate that within
2 to 4.
45 days, they'll have everything under their,
Really?
yeah, under their control. So that's a fun one. Those are fun when they move quickly and come together fast. Prospect 420 is a private infrastructure improvement, a little bit different for us, but we have provided all the utility contacts for them, and they are moving forward. Prospect 320, we continue to work with this company. It is a logistics company, and we've sent them a few sites to consider. There's one that they're particularly interested in. Obviously, the pandemic slowed things a bit for them, but hopefully we'll get them back on track rapidly. Prospect 120 is Project Proxima, as named by the Kansas Department of Commerce. This is an international project that came through our international rep at the Department of Commerce. It was one that Bob likes so much that we have 2 days to put together an entire package to send off to him. I like to respond to those just because they're a good challenge for us, and we like to show that we can put the project together that quickly. This one has been, we've had a lot of follow-up on this one, which is very encouraging. They had us asked for some additional information in March that we were able to submit to them on March 20th, and they just did ask for some additional information at the end of last week that we're getting compiled from Wheatland to get sent off to them today. So hopefully that's a good sign that they're looking that deeply into the site that we provided for them. It is a county project, manufacturing.
So this is one of those from Department of Commerce that didn't end up just being a black hole.
It wasn't just a practice run.
Okay.
Or if it was, it's a really long practice run. But either way, we're getting a
At least
lot
it's
of
still a live
feedback on it.
activity.
Yeah, so it's exciting to see one going this far. Prospect 219, we've not heard anything additional from this prospect. We followed up with them. They are also an international project and haven't gotten a lot of feedback since the start of the pandemic. So, Project Birmingham, Empirical, we should probably give you an update. They are moving forward with stuff, and their engineers are working on wastewater, water, really the entire infrastructure package so that we can put that before the city commission for the development agreement. So things continue to move forward there. Alan, the project manager, is still in Ireland awaiting authority to travel so he can get back here, but he's been great. Even with the time difference, he just stays up till the middle of the night, his time if he has to be in meetings with us. So it's continued to work actually pretty seamlessly. So we're pretty thankful about that. Project Rochester, that's the retail development between Target and the Quick Shop over on Kansas Avenue. That project does have the TIF and SID, the Tax Increment Finance District, and the Community Improvement District in place. Those have been approved by the city. Just waiting to see when they're ready to move forward with that. There isn't really much of an update on 516.3. That is the value-added agriculture project that we've been working on. This project continues to kind of morph and get stuff added to it, and we're hopeful that we're able to still get everything put together into one neat little package. And really, outside of that, as you can see, meetings are picking back up. A lot of these are still Zoom, but quite a few of these are in person now. People seem to be feeling more and more comfortable. We've got quite a few more people traveling in to Finney County again for live meetings from outside the area. So I think we're starting to get the word out there that we don't have a significant amount of active cases within the community. So one thing I will mention, the Garden City Community College did ask us to do the COVID presentation showing where we were at with testing and numbers and those kinds of things for their President's Council as they were looking to make the decisions about how to reopen safely for the next semester. So we were really pleased that we were able to help them with that information, and they felt like it was very helpful in making the decision. A couple of other things. I did do a TV interview last 2 weeks ago, I guess, over in Sublette on those KDGL channels. It was very good. It was, they wanted obviously an update on what we thought, how we thought businesses were doing and how things might change after the pandemic and so forth, but I thought it went really well. And then I was also asked to do an interview with a freelance writer out of Wichita who's working on a story that was originally going to be more of a statewide type story, but he's started to get quite a bit of national traction with it, so it may end up being a national story. But really, he was just wanting to talk with local leaders about what the future for businesses look like, what we think changes might be, you know, based on the industry type and that kind of thing. So that could be an interesting story. We'll keep you posted as to where that goes. Childcare is moving nicely. We have the community service tax credit application in. We've also applied for a combined grant between the Makerspace and the Child Care Center for that 3rd Street building to help offset some of the costs associated with that. So, and Shannon has applied for a couple of other Makerspace side grants as well. So we know we have a really good product there. We just hope that the people issuing grants and tax credits agree with us. So other than that, guys, I don't have a lot of additional updates for you. Leadership Kansas was delayed, as you guys know. We now are set, our first get-together, if you will, is scheduled to be a Zoom in July, and then go from there. They haven't made the final decision about whether or not we'll meet in person. I think it'll all really depend on where cases are. Our first actual physical get-together is supposed to be in Kansas City area. And since they're seeing increase of cases, I'm not sure what will come of that, but we'll keep you posted. That is all I have for you, gentlemen, unless you have questions for me.
On one of the things that you spent a lot of time on while we were kind of out of real life was community development block grants. Touch on that just a minute. How many applications did you receive? How many grants did you make, and where is that process at? I know it was huge.
A lot.
Yeah.
That's not the answer you're looking for.
No, that wasn't quite.
I do not have the actual numbers with me. The city had over $500,000 when we started, and we're down to $35,000 in their funds. We actually had all of their funds gone, and it had to move applications over to the county. We got special permission from Bob North, who's the legal counsel for the Department of Commerce. He agreed to let us use county CDBG funds to fund businesses even though they were within the city limits. So we actually we have one that was actually a county loan, and then we've done 3 additional that were city businesses that we were able to run through the county's fund. Then we had one of the city funds not close their loan. They were able to find a different source of funding. So we ended up with another 35,000, but we have applications out there that I think are going to take those funds up as well. So yeah, we have a lot of money that we were able to get out to businesses. Our big goal obviously was to help the businesses that were the most impacted, restaurants, hotels, those businesses, retail, those businesses that really just could not operate, and it wasn't through any fault of their own, obviously. So we were able to get money into a lot of those hands. At the same time, the federal government put some of the CARES Act funding, pushed that down to the state level. The Department of Commerce opened up about $9 million of those dollars to communities across Kansas to apply for what they called CDBG-CV loans, CV meaning coronavirus, of course. So those are for grants only. They didn't want those to create additional loan funds, which we think is a little unfortunate, but largely because we've had great success, obviously, with our local loan funds. So we would have liked to have seen those get built further. But the maximum they allowed us to apply for was $300,000. They had, I think, more applications than they expected. So the maximum that they funded on purely CDBG CV was $132,000, which the city of Garden City did receive. We did the application on behalf of the city of Garden City. And so we did receive those. The city commission opted to do maximum of $7,500 grants with those funds. So we're working through the process, if you will, for how those will be managed through Great Plains Development. They are the administrator for the CDBG loans, for all of our CDBG loans and grant funds. So we're working with them. I had another call with them yesterday afternoon. They're trying to get some additional guidance from the Department of Commerce, because there's a lot of unanswered questions right now. And as they said, as Faye Trent said with Great Plains, the goal was to rush this money and get it out into the hands, but now everybody's kind of trying to backtrack and make the rules as we go along. So yeah, we'll continue to manage that process. We really appreciate Matt and his staff and the city commission giving us the authority to get those done. Obviously, we are more familiar with how those work than anybody else is, so it made sense for it to be us that led the charge on that, but we really appreciate their confidence in us to get it done and get it done properly. So does that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's kind of what I wanted to know, because I know that we use both city and county funding on that, and we're able to put $500,000 plus in the city side and close to that in the county side. So there's roughly $1 million that went into helping our local city county businesses stay in business long enough to be there when we actually open back up. So I think there's a real big thank you to both city and county for
Absolutely.
having those funds available. Hopefully we can get them replenished and don't have to use them for something else again in the near future, but Are there any other questions for Lana or anything?
All right.
All right.
Thank
Good
you.
job. Nicole.
Good morning.
Good morning.
On the community college workforce development, we are currently now assisting them in compiling some letters of support for the industrial maintenance program, which it has a different name now. I'm not really sure off the top of my head, machine mechanic, industrial something. But it's basically the industrial maintenance program. The submission of that was delayed until July because of unforeseen circumstances, including COVID-19. So it's giving them a little bit more time to put together their package to send to the Board of Regents. So that will be due July 14th. So we have been assisting them with getting some letters of support from local industry on that. Also, as Lana stated, we assisted the college in determining what their policy was going to be on their reopening process, and even past that on some scenarios of if they get some active cases, what do we do, and kind of just some working back and forth on their best practices. So that's been good. As far as youth development at the high school, that's been kind of it's different every day. About a month ago, they were all gung-ho and ready to start planning freshman career fair, and I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm all for the freshman career fair, but that's 500 kids in the same room in really close proximity. So kind of put the brakes on that. We'll probably be doing some Zooms in July to see where they're going to go with that. We're still waiting on guidance from Department of Education. Brandy Watson said he would have something out by July 10th. It looks like that they are going to err on the side of letting the school boards and superintendents decide what's their best practices. As you've seen, we have it's a different state, it's a different case everywhere you go. Every district is different. So I think if we can keep our cases fairly low, then I would say August looks like pretty good. They have allowed the kids to go back and start doing their preseason sports training. Most of that is largely outside. So I think it's been going, they're 10 days into it. So I think it's been going good so far. Putting the kids inside in confined space, we'll just have to see how that goes. They had stated that, we may start one thing and get halfway through and decide this isn't going to work and kind of pull it back. So we'll just kind of roll with the punches on that and see what we're going to do. We may have to get really creative on some type of virtual freshman career fair. So we're holding that out, but we'll see what they say on the 10th and kind of move forward with probably hoping to do a traditional in-person one, but also with the option of if we need to go virtual, then we can. And honestly, with the high school, it's the best possible place to have to do that because so much of that technology is already in place and they're really good about that. So that's where we're at with that. During this whole pandemic thing, I started keeping track of the stats on our website, on the FCEDC website, which I really hadn't paid attention to much before because most of the time it's kind of a landing page and there's information available, but it's not like a lot of people are going out there to get stuff. But with the COVID-19 resource page and all of the information that was available through different funding programs and whatnot through federal and state government, we had all that stuff available on there. So I started tracking the traffic. And Commissioner Dave Jones had made a comment when we had went and Lana presented early in June. He wanted to know how many people we thought were downloading our reopening guide. And just off the top of my head, I had happened to look at the stats that morning, and we were averaging 15 people a day were downloading the reopening guide. So even though the governor had lifted her restrictions and whatever, we still had plenty of businesses that were going out there looking at the guide for best practices. So I think that was positive. And then as of Monday, we're averaging website-wide about 32 visits a day, which is pretty good. Most of those visits are to the COVID-19 page. I just continue to update that with whatever relevant information we have. Some of it's been taken off. Some of the programs aren't available anymore. So just continue to monitor that. But it's been interesting to see. That's all I have.
So someone is reading all of this stuff that you're
Somebody is.
They better be.
That's great.
Kind of along that same education guidelines and stuff, Bob, last month you had indicated that the governor's task force that you set on for education was going to meet or make a presentation to Kansas State Department of Education or something. How did that go and how was it received?
It was very well received. I think they were surprised that we were as far along as we are. There were 5 school districts, one in each one of the regions, as they call them, the state. And we're in Region 1, which is typical of all of our state breakouts. We're about 2/3 of the state. But there are 286 school districts in the state of Kansas. And our particular pilot program was down in Hugoton. And it was really interesting to hear Adrian, the school superintendent down there, share what it was like for his teachers to try to work around and integrate work-based learning and teaching the essential skills instead of soft skills, and integrating them with the idea of when a student leaves the traditional educational program, they're ready for post-secondary situation, be it additional college credits, be it a certification, be it an apprenticeship, some kind of additional training or going into the military. They're ready for something. And it was interesting to hear the needs that were developed from the business side and how business and educators work together. And I think that's what the State Board of Education was really interested in, because it's really going to be the public-private partnership that's going to fund this, because we know there's not going to be any money left in anybody's budget. So if we can get business and education working together and defining what it is that we need to deliver in our students, then good things will happen. So we've been authorized to keep going forward. We know it's going to be very difficult to go to a school board or go to educators and say, okay, on top of everything else you had to do this year in learning how to reteach virtually and everything else, we want you to start integrating this. But they have a curriculum for work-based learning coordinators that they're making available, and there's some grants that'll fund that, where they can go in each school district. Let's say Jenny Hans, who handles a lot of our vocational stuff here, she could go on and get that training and then come back, and there would be a site council, and maybe it would be based on the school service center, which is out of Sublette, that covers, there are 6 school service centers in the state. And so we're looking at the 5 workforce centers in the state, which is Department of Labor, and the 6 service centers, which are school districts, and we're saying, okay, let's break the state up somehow like that, and then get economic development, chambers of commerce, city and county governments in each one of these locales to start learning how to talk to one another. Get the community colleges, the region universities, everybody starting to get on the same page and say, all right, we've all got these programs, we all call them something different, but let's try to start delivering something. And it was very well accepted, and I think with the idea that we'll go through this year laying some more foundation and starting the business and industry relationships to go to the next step. So there's another July 10th board meeting, and we'll basically give them the summary of what we've been doing since then. We've had 3 Zoom calls since then, and we're still working on that, so.
Very
See where it
cool.
goes.
Great, I appreciate that update, because I know early on I sat in on some of the meetings that Bob chaired, and with the Holcomb School District and USD 457 and the community college. And I think it was, to start with back then, it was kind of a unique concept that they thought, wow, we're kind of all doing the same thing in one fashion or another, and maybe we could talk to each other and maybe use some of the same people for the same thing, since, you know, this is pretty much a county-wide thing. So I'm really glad to hear that it's developed into something really workable statewide, and hopefully it'll progress. So.
Well, and I really compliment Nicole, because she has really worked hard with her relationships with the workforce group and the college and USD 363 and 457. The cooperation level that's been established between those 3 people, it's phenomenal. I mean, you can't be all things for all people. So instead of saying it's my program, all of a sudden it's our program, and boy, good things are going to happen. And I think through also the Garden City Builders Association and now the carpentry class, it's happening because all 3 of them are working together, and they're just going to have it in one place, but everybody can learn from it. So the pattern is started. What we need to do, and we've been invited to speak with the Chamber of Commerce and start introducing this to the business community, but those breakfast meetings haven't been happening. So one of these days we're going to have that, and we're going to go to them and say, okay, here is your role, and here's how it can work. So I think it's going to go. It's just going to take a little more time.
That's okay.
And I'm really patient in that area.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Patient Bob.
Okay.
That's really great, and I think that you know, this board can kind of pat itself on the back, because with your involvement in that statewide, Ron spends a lot of time with Holcomb School District. David, of course, spends a lot of time being on the Board of Trustees at the college, and I know Sam spends a lot of time up at the high school with all of the programs and things that they have up there. So I think it's really great to see the involvement and the leadership that Finney County Economic Development has in the educational process, not only in the city and Holcomb, but countywide, and even in this involvement statewide. So thanks, and you guys deserve a pat on the back for everything you're doing. So
Can I ask a question of you? For instance, I have a daughter-in-law that has 2 kids in junior high, and she said that she was with her 2 kids almost 7.5 hours a day because they have 13 teachers. And she's very well educated, however. She can help, and she's a stay-at-home mom now. What's happening with the kids that have no education at home from mom and dad?
And I think that's going to be the real challenge of this virtual education, and hopefully on this July 10th, if they do turn it back to the school districts and local boards to make a decision that they can open these classrooms. And, in speaking with some of the school superintendents, the worst thing that could happen would be that it stays all virtual, because a lot of people are going to get nothing but the time allowed with that teacher. Secondly, if they open it and it has to be in a classroom like this and they can only accommodate 10 kids instead of the normal 25 to 30 that they have, how many hours a day can you teach so that you can rotate the kids?
Yeah.
Do they go to school every other day? There's a lot of things that have to be worked out. But if we don't get something figured out in the first half of the year, then we're gonna have to really rethink the old long-term deal. But I can't answer
Yeah,
how we're gonna pick up
nobody
that other
can.
half,
I understand
but
that.
I think the urgency and the understanding, and hopefully they'll open the doors and let the kids come back and do all the safe things they can do.
I would like to say, though, I think I mentioned at the last meeting that I did participate in the school board, 457 school board meeting via Zoom the month before last. And it was incredible to listen to how their staff and how their teachers and faculty have come together with the families to make it work. And I think, honestly, I know it's challenging and it's not the way we've always done it, but I honestly believe that we can come through this with even stronger educational entities. But it's all about being adaptive. They're having to figure out, how do we reach the student? And it's not one size fits all. Obviously, as you're saying, we have to really be mindful that kids learn in different ways, and kids have different support systems outside of the school system. So honestly, I'm obviously a pretty positive person, but I think we're going to see good things come from this. I think we'll see a return to that really individualized education that's been being pushed anyway. That IEP idea for all students has really been being pushed anyway. And I think this maybe actually gives us a little added insight into how we address those needs. So I'm excited about it. And I have to tell you again, I could not be more impressed with how 457 faculty handled it. And from what I hear from around the state, we were absolutely a model school system, the way that we dealt with it. So I think Finney County, again, has a lot to be proud of for stepping up and finding out how to make that work and how to engage the families and the parents in that process.
I'm really glad to hear that, because most of you know that if it comes to virtual stuff, I'm probably going to show up in person to find out what the epidemic was really like, because I probably wouldn't learn a whole lot sitting at home relying on that. I am really glad that the teachers have stepped up to do this, because I know there are a lot of families that both parents are working parents. a lot of kids don't have the luxury, and our school districts, both 363 and 457, have made the attempt to make sure these kids have, you know, the laptops and all of this kind of stuff. So I think that's really good. Like I say, I would hate to have to sit at home and try to teach my kids now, because education today is not what education was 60 years ago. So it's totally different. So thanks for all the stuff you guys are doing, and I know that Nicole and Shannon are working right along with this, and with that, we'll move forward and go on with Shannon. And thank you, Mayor, or Commissioner,
Yeah.
Chairman. Shannon.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning, Shannon.
Give you a quick update on the social media. GreaterGardenCity.com over the last month had 11,600 views, which is about 500 a day. The top story from that was the Wildwood Park opening, which was just a story from a couple days ago. The Facebook pages, Garden City Journal, we had a total of 58,000 post views, which is about 2,000 a day, and that reached just short of 30,000 unique people. And then Greater Garden City, that Facebook page was just short of 12,000 post views, or about 400 a day. So overall, doing good on that. So I think the other thing I'm going to talk about here is the presentation. Well, it's actually a little bit changed because I've actually updated it for the current data. But this is a presentation that we first made for the
County Commission.
County Commissioners, and actually presented it a couple more times. But it's about the economic impacts of COVID-19. So the premise is we're just providing a compilation of all the stuff that's related to COVID-19 as of yesterday is when it was all updated, and so forth. So, all right. So the first thing is, and this is the May unemployment rates. So if you've seen this presentation before, we actually have some updated stuff. This is the May unemployment. You see, there's a little bit higher unemployment in the eastern half of the state than in the western half of the state. Even some of the places in the western half, Finney, Seward, Ford, that was up last month. We've actually seen that come down quite a bit. I think we were at 5.9 in Finney County. Mm-hmm. Last month we're at 5.1. Ford has dropped about a similar amount, and Seward actually has reduced as well. But you can see so far, this really, if we're talking about unemployment, and overall the unemployment rate for Kansas is 10%. So our 5.1 is pretty good. And you can see really that 10% is being drug out by the Wichita area and then the Kansas City area for that. If we go to the next slide, we can see this is the change in unemployment rate from May of this year compared to May of last year. So again, if we're looking at where there's a high concentration of unemployment or where there's been a big change, again, not too surprising, it's the eastern half of Kansas, Wichita area, Kansas City area. Okay, so when we're talking about COVID and talk about how that relates to our decisions that we make, the first thing that we need to talk about is kind of based on what is a good testing program. And this is laid out by the CDC, how we know we have an adequate testing program. And what they say is we need 80% of our tests to be negative to say we have an adequate testing program. The thing I want to point out is we can't just measure adequacy of testing by just looking at that percentage. For one reason we could think of, what we're doing in Finney County is to get into the county-based testing, we have to have, they're only taking people who have symptoms, right? So we have a pretty high, I don't remember what our positive test rate is, but it's fairly high. But if we only let people in that have symptoms, we're just gonna get, as we move through the pandemic, we're gonna get less and less people tested, but the percentage is going to be about the same because they have symptoms, right? So we can't just rely on this percentage of positive and negative tests to be the only way that we determine if we're doing adequate testing in our communities. And we'll see this kind of manifest itself in as we move through here. So here's a map of new COVID cases. Isn't too surprising. You see out in our southwest Kansas area, then we see the Wichita area, and we see the Kansas City area. Not too surprising. But one thing is, we see that this is really related to testing rates. And again, this is updated since yesterday. And now it's really hard to see because their color scale is all messed up. But the highest is 50 per 1,000, but you can see almost everybody's at that. But look, when you're here, these numbers are about 2 to 3 times higher than the Kansas City area. So when we're talking about testing, we are testing more out in this area. One thing to take a look at though, look at Riley County. They're testing pretty low as of yesterday. And this is historically, through the whole pandemic, they're testing pretty low. Now what Facebook and Carnegie Mellon is doing is putting together a data collection called Data for Good. And what this is doing, it's measuring a bunch of different things, but one of the things that this is measuring is COVID symptoms. So it's looking at users, the Facebook users, measuring who has COVID positive symptoms and then reporting it. And all that place on western Kansas where it's all like that light gray, we just don't have data. So just look at the places that are pink. But what's interesting, on this map, where we have the highest level of COVID symptoms, Riley and Geary County. But when we were talking about who's getting tested, that was one of the lowest. I mean, if we're talking about all of western Kansas, or all of eastern Kansas, Riley County is one of the lowest places that's getting tested, even though it has one of the highest rates of symptoms. So we see, this is our first clue, our first pieces of data that says, you know what? Testing might not be the same thing as the number of positive cases in an area. So what we have in here is we look at the CDC and what they say, and some of the notes that we're going to need as we go through this. 35% of the cases total that we see are asymptomatic. We see that 0.4% of the cases overall are fatal. And then we have, we'll use this last piece in a bit. The contagious course of virus estimates between 7 and 10 days from the date of symptom onset. So here's the CDC. That's just restating it, but you can kind of see they have it broken down by scenarios and stuff like that. But those numbers are the important ones. So we see that there's a break between the testing and maybe who's positive. So one of the things we'd like to use is what if we use the fatality rate in an area to get an estimation? Because we do have a question about, are we testing adequately? But one thing we're not going to have too much argument about is, did somebody die? I mean, that's a pretty definite thing that happened. So what if we use the fatality rates as an estimation for the true number of cases that was in a community? And if we look at Finney County, we've tested positive about 1,500. And if we look at the fatality rate, we should have about 2,500. Pretty close. Ford is almost right exactly on there now. They've got 1,900 tested positive. From the fatalities, we'd expect to be 2,000. But let's go look at eastern Kansas. Wyandotte County, they've tested 1,900 positive, but looking at the number of fatalities, they should have tested 19,000 positive cases. So this is kind of getting to the point where we feel pretty confident in the number of testing positives, the testing that we've done out in Finney County, Ford County, Seward County. We see that we've had a lot of tests. We've had the National Guard come in and do our testing, and that hasn't been the case everywhere. So the picture, let's see when the next slide is. Okay, so what we see is that light blue, so the bottom bar for each of those is the actual number of cases that we see. So if you look in the middle, we see Finney and Ford and Leavenworth. The dark blue is if we were to take the fatalities in those counties, how many cases we'd expect to see. And you can see for Finney and Ford, we're pretty close. Leavenworth is pretty close on there too. Sedgwick, Johnson, Wyandotte, they are so far away on the actual number of cases that we'd expect from the fatality rates. So we have an idea that it's not that they don't have it tested, they don't have people that are positive in these communities. It's just they haven't been tested. And it's a deficiency in testing. And so if we get to the next one, we can even say, well, Well, so this one is interesting with the U.S. military. So what we try to do is say, well, our fatality rate is pretty much matching up with what the research says. About ours in Finney County is about 0.5%. Ford is about 0.4%. And remember, CDC says about the true fatality rate is about 0.4%. And we're trying to find a different state that tests close to that, and there's no state that tests close to it. But one group that does test really close to it, and actually it's down to 0.3% of fatality right now, is the U.S. military. And we know that the U.S. military will be able to test adequately. So we have another case that the testing and the fatality rate pretty much match up. Whereas the state of Kansas overall, again, the number of positive cases is way short of what we'd expect from the estimated number of fatality rates. Does that make sense, what I'm getting at there? Okay, so here's the deal. This is the number that everybody is reporting, the KDHE is reporting for each county. And this is a cumulative count. And you can kind of see that dark blue, where the Finney County is the dark blue, Ford County is the light blue, Wyandotte is that lightish orange color, and Johnson is that darkish orange color. And we're all getting up to about the same. So maybe we kind of have just the same looking infections. So the problem is, and this is one of those things, the impetus of this, is we're having media take that cumulative number, that 1,500 or whatever, at 1,400 at this time, and they report things such as, they say KDG confirms that more than 1,400 people have the virus in Finney County. They're taking the cumulative number and assigning that to currently, this is what's going on. And that's not the case. We know that not everybody who have had it currently has it. So we have a problem with that cumulative number. And the problem that this is having, is we're having contract workers from outside our community, or from Finney County, but then move to do work outside. Those other outside communities don't feel like Finney County is safe. But the problem is, we actually are kind of confident in our numbers, and we feel like the other places have just as many cases, if maybe even more. They just haven't tracked it as well. And we had in Sheila had some businesses downtown that said that they were not wanting to shop in Garden City because they didn't feel safe because of that number. So this is a quick little diagram of flow in and out. So it's kind of hard to see, but both the top maps are basically the same thing. It's flow in and flow out. So if somebody comes in and out to Garden City in a day, it's going to measure one flow in, one flow out. The important part is this is picked up from just yesterday. We can see that our flowing in and out of Finney County is about what you'd expect your trade area to be. But you can see from January 1st, is that what that says? Yeah. Yes. You can see from the beginning of the year to currently, you definitely see where COVID hit. You see in this little, you can even see like the regular weekly patterns of flow in and out. COVID hit. We still have it, not the same looking shape, but basically the same kind of thing. And that's what we finally got back to. Just this last weekend was the first week since before the lockdown where our flow in and out of Finney County has been the same. So it did make a difference. It is making a difference. But we can still do a better job of telling the current story of what's happening with COVID. Because as we see how counties react differently, especially what's going on now in eastern Kansas, and we'll get to it in a second, we are going to have our story make sure that we have accurate reflections of what's going on with COVID in our communities. So if we go to the next slide. So what we want to do, when people are talking about, do I feel safe in a community? Do I feel safe coming to Garden City? Do I feel safe going to Sedgwick County? Do I feel safe going to Johnson County? We don't really care about the historic number of COVID cases. Right? That's like if we're talking about a birth rate of a community, we don't see how many people live in a community and say, well, Finney County, 41,000 people. Well, yeah, they all have been born, but that doesn't mean that's the birth rate. So what we want to do is estimate the number of active cases. And this will allow us to get more picture of the pandemic locally, be able to make comparisons between the different communities, and then also make it easier for the local community to make wise decisions about the safety measures that they need to be able to conduct business and trade in that area. So what we're going to look at, we'll see some graphs in a second. there'll be two different things. We'll say a 7-day active scenario, a 10-day active scenario after that test the positive. And then we'll include also without these asymptomatic cases and then with asymptomatic cases, because we know from the research about 35% of the cases, at least at that time, that about 35% of the cases are asymptomatic. We actually added that to that. So if we're talking about a true picture, we have the ones that were tested positive plus some asymptomatic cases. So if we do that for Finney County, it's pretty much what you'd expect to see in a situation. We have the number of cases went up very rapidly, and then as we got a handle of the situation, it went down. And right now, as of the data from Monday, because KDHE updates their data every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So this is the update from Monday. We have somewhere between 20 and 14 active cases in Finney County. So we've done a really good job of getting a handle of the situation. Looks like the practices that we're doing are still doing a good job of keeping that number low. This isn't the case everywhere. Here's the current, same measurements. This is what's going on right now in Johnson County. First of all, you'd like to see, we need to point out something here. They had the same quick uptick that we had here, but they didn't have the testing resources that we got out here with the National Guard and that sort of thing. So I highly doubt this flattening happened. And from the fatality rates, I highly doubt that the caseload stayed flat. If you look at what should, well, actually we'll talk about that in a second, but if you go look at this right here, we definitely see now that they have started to implement more testing, their case numbers are shooting right up. So this is one indication that different communities are reacting differently. Do we feel confident in the end of the pit? Not, I wouldn't say end, but have we controlled the COVID cases here? It seems we have a pretty good idea. We have testing, we've got all of that. In Johnson County, I don't know if that's the same thing. So this is just a quick thing. I took that data, I smoothed it out a little bit. I took a week average for each point, so it looks a little bit smoother. Again, Finney County, Ford County are the dark blue and the light blue. Wyandotte is that orangish, light orangish color. Johnson County is that dark orangish color. And you definitely see there's two different paths for COVID, active COVID cases in the area. And like I said, we aren't sure right here. Everybody else has a peak, they don't have a peak. If you go look at their fatality rate and say how big, if we had enough tests, and we take all the other pieces of evidence, how far up should this orange peak for Johnson County, should they have gone? See the top of this screen? Add 9 more screens up there. That's where the top of their peak should be based on their data. So when we're talking about the cumulative counts, sure, we're about the same now, about the 1,500, 1,900, but we are pretty sure Johnson County is missing about 18,000 cases because they didn't have enough testing. Yes?
Shannon, where, if you put on the start of the aggressive testing in Finney County, is that when our slope starts going way up?
Yes, and I had that slide and I took it off just because I didn't want to put it on there, but I mean, you can see like as soon as it's like this little inflection point here,
right,
where this, I mean, it's just like right here when we had the National Guard come in. I mean, it really is a good indication that
Testing
not that
matters.
We had more cases, we had better testing.
I think that would be a real key element, would be a strike line to say, okay, we saw the problem and so we started testing, and sure enough,
right?
But it didn't continue. It
and
crested.
that slide is on the presentation of this on our website. That slide is on there.
Okay.
And truly,
Thank you.
if you guys think back to the very start of this and the whole goal when this was started and when the president came out and asked for folks to stick together and safer at home and all of those things, the whole idea was to flatten that curve. That was the entire idea behind it. We can't stop people from getting it necessarily, but we can slow the spread of the virus so we don't overwhelm hospital systems. As you can see, that's exactly what happened in Ford and Finney counties. We did have a spike. Those were obviously when we had the most hospitalizations as well. But now our hospitalizations have diminished or gone completely away in these communities. If you've been paying attention to the news, Sedgwick County is just now reaching the highest numbers that they've had hospitalized, and their highest testing numbers. So again, kudos to Finney County and Ford County and Seward County for recognizing that there was something we as community members could do to help slow that spread. And I would say that the data is indicative that we did a good job of that.
Good.
Any other questions?
I through this whole thing, I've wondered, we show we had 1,500 plus cases of this, but through the whole thing, we had 10 people die. It makes you wonder, is our hospitalization or is our treatment facilities or whatever that much better than Johnson County or Sedgwick County? Sedgwick County says they had 800 cases now, and that's on the current rise, but they had 30 people die.
That's just a law of averages. Quite frankly, it's a larger population.
3 times the number of fatalities that Finney County had, with half of the reported cases.
And so that's the other flip of this. If Eastern Kansas says, no, we had enough tests, you all had the cases, we only had a couple, then we have a very, very, very strong case in our hospital system out here, light years above what's going on in Kansas.
Much better.
I mean, I'll take that story too. If we want that to be our story, I mean, I'll love to have a hospital system that's greater than Kansas City's hospital system. I would guess that it's probably just they didn't test enough. But if we want to double down on it, I'll double down on having a great hospital system, because maybe that is the reason that we see a difference in the fatality rates. I mean, it's more than 10 times difference, 10 times fatality rate difference.
But you said you had 10 here and they had 30 there, but look at the population versus our population.
Well, it's there up to like 80 now. So there is a difference in that, but the ratio that we're looking at is testing positive to fatalities. Okay. And so they say they have, right now we're pretty close to Johnson County. I think Johnson County says 1,300 positive cases, 80 deaths. We're at 1,500, 10 deaths. Okay. So of the positive cases, if they say that, no, that's a true 1,300, we only have 1,300.
Then their death rate is way high.
They're dying almost 10 times greater rate than we are out in Western Kansas.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean.
And there are some variables in this that I do want to make sure people understand. We used to have Coffee County listed in that presentation for a very good reason, because it was one that showed that they should have had a lot of cases, but they didn't. But their death rate, the number of deaths they experienced, unfortunately, was a large number. It was because of the population that was impacted. They actually had an outbreak in a nursing home facility, and as we know, that is a very vulnerable population. Double into that they're actually in a confined area with others, and obviously this disease is extraordinarily scary for that industry. So we had them listed on there because they were one of the examples of, you still have to know where the cases are happening. It's not just about testing, it's about knowing what population's being impacted. What we know in looking at our age ranges is that it is our healthiest folks, thank goodness, who have been impacted by this virus. By and large, it is our essential working population that's been hit by it. That has been a benefit to us because obviously we haven't seen large numbers of fatalities among seniors and those types of things where those vulnerable populations are. So it is important. You still have to know who is getting the virus and who it is that's dying in those communities. But if we're looking at just general population deaths, you can pretty well lay those directly on top of those CDC statistics, and they're matching up really well.
Well, this is one of the problems that I've had through this whole thing. I think Finney County has been well ahead of a lot of the other counties testing-wise, and you kind of have to give it to the county health department and stuff for that, getting the testing and everything done. But at the same time, I think my problem with it is that the fact that before you could get tested, you had to be asymptomatic. So you had to already think that, hey, I'm sick, test me. And sure enough, you tested positive. So that just totally distorts the ratio when you look at the population of the county
Right.
versus the testing that was done versus the cases that have been positive. It has just been,
Right.
totally blown out of proportion as far as I can look at it, even though it is still a big number, so.
Yeah, and looking at that, it looks like we're missing about 600 positive cases that probably didn't have a high enough symptom, or people just didn't opt into that test, or could get into the test. So we do think that we're missing about 600 positive cases. Still better
Well,
than 18,000
I've heard of some people that, thought they had the symptoms and everything, but they weren't sick enough and didn't have all of the, major symptoms, so they didn't, they just kind of stayed at home and took care of themselves, so they weren't reported, and
Right.
and that
Yep.
goes with that other 600 or so cases that you're talking about. So
How far away are we from being able to plot sales tax and guest tax numbers through this to see if we have an impact curve?
We did, last month, I think we were down 7%, or 2 months ago.
In sales tax,
In
this is
sales
retail
tax,
sales
that's right,
tax.
And I think the May sales tax should come out this week,
Okay.
tomorrow, to see how that is. Looking at the traffic that we saw in that one, the flow, I would expect it still to be down, but not as far down. Then I think for this month, it looks like it should be about to
Well,
average.
I think it's another piece that, as we come back, if you can roll back into that traffic deal and then correlate that to,
Especially how we're doing versus how some other communities that, if they have to keep on, like Riley County just put out a new order for further lockdowns. They went up and now they're putting more lockdowns on. If we can show that we did a good job, we're doing a good job of controlling it, and our sales tax compared to everybody else's sales tax reflects that. I mean, that's a really good case of a proper response to the COVID pandemic.
good, thanks.
Right, thank you.
Good information, thank you.
Yeah,
any
thank
other
you.
questions or anything for Shannon? Okay. Well, our next item of business was COVID-19 update. I think we just pretty well
Well,
covered that, unless you've got some additional.
Yeah, I think we again need to really recognize our businesses for how they managed this situation. In all of the interviews that I've done throughout this process, that's the one thing that I want to continue to stress. Our businesses stepped up, worked together. They didn't worry about what if one of my competitors stays open and I don't, or what if they reopen faster than I do? Do I lose my customers? We didn't have that mentality here. I saw it other places. We saw it on news reports. We saw it on Facebook. But in Finney County, that cohesiveness that we talk about all the time from the governmental level specifically, when we talk about how the county, the cities, the college, everybody works together, that same feeling and camaraderie is definitely feeding down not only into our business community, but into our residents. And I think as a community, we have a lot to be proud of in how folks stepped up and dealt with it, regardless of your personal belief about the situation. I mean, if there's anything we know, it's all over the board how people feel about this virus, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But more important than the fact that everybody has their own opinion is how they live together with those varying opinions. And this community absolutely was a rock star in figuring out that, we just have to give everybody the room to make their own decisions. And I just can't say enough how proud we should be of our residents and of our business community for really taking care of each other.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think you've seen the merchants do a dedicated phase in, if you will, and you look at Wichita now, they were all gung-ho to get open and everything else, and now you see a lot of their restaurants and bars and different things that have said, whoa, we might have got there too quick, we're closing back up.
Yeah.
So, Garden City, Finney County hadn't seen that. We're open for business. We're working at it, and we think we've got this thing
Agreed.
diagnosed.
One other thing I would mention, I'm sorry, I failed to mention this earlier, the Department of Commerce last week sent out an email. They had won a Silver Shovel Award from one of the ratings agencies that does, that looks at projects from all across the 50 states and ranks states according to their development opportunities and so forth. The Department of Commerce submitted 10 projects from the past 12-month period. Empirical was in that list of 10 projects, as you can imagine. It was the largest project anywhere in the state, and it was the only project west of Salina that was listed in their competition. So very, very proud of that project, and this community should be very proud of that project. That is a huge project. Obviously, if it's the largest in the state of Kansas, that should tell you a lot about the meaning of that project. So congratulations to everyone who helped make that project happen.
Well, that's really good to hear, because I think strictly because of staff involvement and persuasiveness and all of those things, for the lack of that project could be an Amarillo today. So I think that's just another pat on the back for Finney County Economic Development and the staff that we have. So, any other questions, comments? I only have one other thing I'd like to add, and it kind of goes along with the medical part of that that Shannon reported. As you all know, Scott Taylor, Executive CEO of St. Catherine's Hospital, is gonna decide to enjoy life now for a while. July the 1st, Scott will be going into retirement. I'm sure he won't just be done forever, but I'd like to wish Scott good luck and thank him for all the things that he's done in the last 15 years or so that he's been in Garden City with St. Catherine's Hospital. So
Absolutely.
kudos to St. Catherine's, and really kudos to Scott Taylor. So thanks, Scott. That's any other questions or comments, anything that we need to talk about? We do need a little executive session for about 15 minutes. That will probably be adequate, won't it?
Yes.
Okay. And if we could, we have a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion.
Got a motion, got a second? I'll second. Yeah. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. And we will adjourn in 2 or 3 minutes for executive session.